So the other day, I was doing some research on how COVID has affected the finances of women, like over the past year, right? And I started to see articles about couples and how COVID has like affected the finances of couples as a whole, right? And I started to see like this common thread through all these different articles and all this research. And there were women that were basically saying that they didn't know what their financial health was, right? They didn't know how much debt they had within the marriage or couple, the relationship. They didn't know what the assets were. They didn't know where their assets were. They didn't know where their investments were, how much they had invested as, a couple. They had knowledge of what they had invested for themselves in terms of their own 401ks or IRAs, but they didn't necessarily know how much money their husband had or how much debt they had as a couple. And, no judgment, but, it just kind of blew my mind, because I was like, in this day and age, there were still women saying like, oh, I don't handle that stuff. My husband takes care of all of that. Like, I don't know what the investments are. My husband handles that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you don't want to be involved in that, that's absolutely fine. But at the very least, I think it's important that we have the knowledge of what we own and what we owe. You have to have knowledge of that. There were women that were saying that didn't know that. One woman said, oh, I would use a debit card and my husband uses a credit card. Well, they were $30,000 in credit card debt, and she didn't know that until, the pandemic hit, and now their finances are tight because her hours got scaled back at work. So now they're like really looking through all their finances, right? And it was a surprise to her. So it's like, anytime you're married, whatever marital debt you have, even if you're not creating that debt belongs to both of you. And like I said, is no judgment, but here's the question. If knowledge is power and you have no knowledge of the assets and liabilities you have or lack thereof, then what power do you have in that regards? It's okay if you don't want to get involved in the day-to-day activities of the finances. That's fine. It's okay if you don't want to manage your money. That's fine. But you have to have knowledge of what's going on. It is so important. It is how you're going to empower yourself. It's how you're going to meet some of the goals that you have, individual goals that you have for yourself, as well as goals that you have as a couple. You have to know what is going on.